Khalil al-Rashid stared at his reflection in the marble bathroom of his family's palace. The custom-tailored suit clung perfectly to his athletic frame, but it felt like a straitjacket. Today was the day he would meet Layla Haddad, the woman his father had chosen for him to marry in 3 months. A business merger disguised as a wedding. "Your father is waiting," his personal assistant announced through the door. Khalil adjusted his tie one last time. At 32, he had spent his entire life following the carefully plotted course laid out for him. Harvard Business School, executive position at Al-Rashid Petroleum, strategic marriage, everything planned down to which houses he would own, and which children he would have. "Tell him I'll be right down," Khalil replied, his voice betraying none of the storm brewing inside him. The Al-Rashid family estate sprawled across 50 acres of prime desert property, an oasis of wealth in the harsh landscape. As Khalil descended the grand staircase, he saw his father, Farid, standing in the foyer with 2 bodyguards flanking him. "You're late," Farid said tersely. "The Haddads value punctuality." "Forgive me, father. I was making sure everything was perfect for this important meeting." Farid nodded curtly. "The helicopter is ready. Let's not waste any more time." As they walked toward the helipad, Khalil felt the weight of his family legacy pressing down on him. 7 generations of Al-Rashids had built an empire that controlled nearly 15% of the region's oil reserves. His great-grandfather had transformed the family from wealthy nomads to industrial titans. His grandfather had expanded into shipping. His father had diversified into technology and real estate. And Khalil was expected to cement the alliance with the Haddad family, securing access to their vast natural gas holdings and creating an energy conglomerate that would dominate the market for decades. The meeting went exactly as choreographed. The Haddad family mansion rivaled their own in opulence. Layla was educated at Oxford, spoke 5 languages, and moved through high society with practiced grace. She was beautiful, accomplished, and as trapped as he was. "I believe our children will find much to admire in each other," Layla's father said, raising a crystal glass in toast. "Indeed," Farid agreed. "This union will bring prosperity to both our families for generations to come." Khalil smiled politely, exchanged pleasantries, and played his part perfectly. But inside, something had finally snapped. As they flew back to the estate, he made his decision. That night, after his father had retired, Khalil slipped into his private study and made a series of discreet arrangements. He transferred a modest sum, enough to live comfortably but not enough to raise immediate alarms, to an account he had established years ago. He packed a single bag with casual clothes he rarely wore and essential items. Just before dawn, he left a brief note on his desk. "I need time to think. Please don't worry." Then he slipped past the night security, using the blind spots he had memorized as a teenager. By sunrise, he was on a commercial flight to Europe, traveling under one of the alternate identities he had quietly established over the years. 3 days and several connecting flights later, Khalil found himself in Costa Azul, a small fishing village on the Mediterranean coast of Spain. He had chosen it precisely because it appeared in no family vacation records, no business holdings, nothing that would connect it to the Al-Rashid Empire. The small rental cottage sat on a cliff overlooking the harbor. Whitewashed walls, blue shutters, and a simple kitchen were a stark contrast to the marble halls and gold fixtures he had left behind. Khalil stood on the tiny terrace, breathing in the salt air, watching fishing boats return with their day's catch. 3 months, he murmured to himself. 3 months to figure out what I actually want. That first morning in Costa Azul, Khalil woke to the sounds of the village coming to life. Fishermen calling to each other, car engines sputtering to life, children laughing as they ran to school. He dressed in jeans and a simple linen shirt, clothes that would have been deemed unsuitable for an Al-Rashid in public, and ventured into the village. The central market was a riot of colors, smells, and sounds. Fresh fish glistened on beds of ice. Farmers arranged vibrant produce in neat displays. Tourists and locals haggled good-naturedly over prices. Khalil wandered through the stalls, enjoying his anonymity. Here, He wasn't the heir to a petroleum empire. He was just another visitor, perhaps a writer or a businessman on sabbatical. "Hey, cuidado," a sharp voice called out. Khalil turned just as a stack of wooden crates tilted precariously toward him. He jumped back, narrowly avoiding being crushed, but collided with someone behind him. "Mira por donde vas," the same voice snapped. He found himself face to face with a young woman holding a now empty basket, the fish it had contained scattered across the cobblestones. She was perhaps in her late 20s, with olive skin, dark hair pulled back in a practical braid, and eyes that flashed with irritation. "Lo siento," Khalil apologized, reaching for his wallet. "Let me pay for the fish." The woman's eyes narrowed. "Your Spanish has an accent." "Tourist?" "Something like that," he replied, switching to English. "I'm staying for a few months, writing a book." The lie came easily. "Well, Mr. Writer, those fish represent half my morning's profit." She knelt to gather what could be salvaged. Khalil joined her on the ground. "I truly am sorry. I'm Khalil, by the way." She glanced up, seeming to truly look at him for the first time. "Elena Vargas, and you can make it up to me by helping me carry today's delivery to the restaurant up the hill." Before he could respond, she had thrust a heavy crate of fish into his arms and started walking, clearly expecting him to follow. The restaurant, El Faro, sat on a hill overlooking the harbor. As they approached, an older man with weather-beaten skin emerged, grinning widely. "Elena, always on time." His smile faltered when he spotted Khalil. "Who's your helper?" "Just a tourist who needs to learn to watch where he's going, Tio Miguel," Elena replied. "He's making amends." Miguel laughed. "Well, any friend of Elena's is welcome here. Come in, come in." "We're not friends," Elena corrected, but Miguel was already ushering them inside. The kitchen was warm and fragrant with herbs and spices. Two young men were chopping vegetables, while an older woman stirred something that smelled divine. "Mama, this is Khalil. He's staying in the village for a while. Writing a book, he says," Elena announced, the skepticism clear in her voice. The older woman, Elena's mother, looked up with warm eyes. "Any man who helps my daughter is welcome to stay for lunch. I'm Carmen." "I couldn't impose," Khalil began. "Nonsense," Miguel interrupted. "Consider it payment for your labor. Elena, show him where to wash up." Reluctantly, Elena led Khalil to a small bathroom. As he washed his hands, he caught his reflection in the mirror and barely recognized himself. His carefully maintained appearance had given way to stubble and wind-swept hair. For the first time in years, he looked real. Lunch was a revelation. Simple, fresh ingredients transformed into dishes bursting with flavor. The family talked, laughed, and argued around him, occasionally translating or explaining local references. Elena remained reserved, studying him with undisguised curiosity. "So what's this book about?" she finally asked as they finished their meal. Khalil hesitated. "It's about someone searching for their place in the world." "Fiction or memoir?" The question was pointed. "A bit of both, perhaps." Elena nodded slowly. "Well, if you want to understand our village, you should come to the harbor meeting tonight. The big fishing companies are trying to push out the independent boats. Might give you some material for your book." "I'd like that," Khalil said, surprised to find he meant it. As he walked back to his cottage that evening, Khalil realized he had just experienced something he hadn't in years. An unscripted, genuine human interaction. No agenda, no family. Reputation to maintain, no business angle. Just people sharing a meal and conversation. For the first time since arriving, he wondered if 3 months in Costa Azul might not be enough. The harbor meeting turned out to be held in a weathered community center that smelled of salt and old wood. Khalil arrived to find the room already packed with fishermen, market vendors, and restaurant owners. He spotted Elena at the front, gesturing animatedly as she spoke with an older fisherman. When she saw him, surprise flickered across her face. She nodded slightly in acknowledgement before turning her attention back to the conversation. "That's Ramon Torres," a voice beside Khalil explained. He turned to find Miguel standing next to him. He's been fishing these waters for 50 years. His father before him, and his grandfather before that. What exactly is happening with the big fishing companies? Khalil asked. Miguel's expression darkened. Marisco's International. They've bought the processing plant and are setting impossible terms for the independent fishermen, lower prices, demanding specific quotas, threatening to import from other regions if we don't comply. He nodded toward Elena. She's been organizing the resistance, trying to establish a cooperative so we can maintain our independence. Khalil felt a strange twinge of guilt. This situation wasn't so different from how his own family's corporation had expanded over the years, buying out smaller operations, applying economic pressure until selling was the only option. The meeting began, and Elena stepped forward. The room immediately quieted. As most of you know, Marisco's International has issued their final terms, she announced, her voice steady but passionate. They're offering 30% less than market value for our catch, with requirements that would force most boats to fish beyond sustainable levels. Angry murmurs filled the room. My family has fished here for 4 generations, Ramon called out. My grandson wants to follow in my footsteps. But how can he if there are no fish left because these corporate vultures force us to overfish? Khalil observed quietly, noting how Elena commanded respect despite her youth. As the discussion continued, he found himself mentally analyzing the situation from a business perspective. The community needed leverage, a way to circumvent the corporate stranglehold. When the meeting ended, people lingered in small groups, voices low and concerned. Khalil approached Elena as she gathered papers. Impressive meeting, he said. You clearly have everyone's respect. Elena looked up, her expression guarded. Not everyone. Half the village thinks I'm being stubborn, that we should take what Marisco's offers before they withdraw completely. And what do you think? I think once we surrender our independence, we'll never get it back. She studied him. You seem interested for a writer. Khalil chose his words carefully. My father was in business. I picked up a few things. What kind of business? Energy. It wasn't a lie, just a simplification of astronomical proportions. Elena's eyes narrowed slightly. Well, Mr. Energy Business Writer, if you have any brilliant insights, I'm all ears. Otherwise, I have work to do. Actually, Khalil said, I might have some ideas. Have you considered direct distribution channels to bypass the processing plant entirely? For the next hour, they sat at a corner table, Khalil sketching distribution, networks and pricing models, while Elena pointed out practical challenges. Neither noticed as the room gradually emptied until Miguel approached with keys in hand. I hate to interrupt this strategy session, he said with amusement, but I need to lock up. Elena blinked, seemingly surprised to find it was already past midnight. We'll continue tomorrow, she told Khalil. It wasn't a question. Over the following weeks, Khalil found himself increasingly involved in Costa Azul's fishing community. What began as occasional strategy sessions with Elena evolved into daily meetings, market visits, and even trips on fishing boats to understand the operation firsthand. Each morning, he woke before dawn to help the fishermen prepare their boats. His soft hands grew calloused, his designer clothes were replaced by practical work clothes, and his skin bronzed under the Mediterranean sun. In the evenings, he joined Elena at her family's restaurant, where they refined their plan to establish a fisherman's cooperative. You're still a terrible fisherman, Elena teased one evening as they walked along the beach. 2 months had passed since Khalil's arrival, and the initial wariness between them had given way to an easy companionship. I'm getting better, he protested. Ramon said my net mending was almost acceptable yesterday. Elena laughed, a sound that had become one of Khalil's favorite things in Costa Azul. A high praise from Ramon. They stopped to watch the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. A comfortable silence settled between them. Why are you really here, Khalil? Elena asked softly, her eyes still on the horizon. The question caught him off guard. What do you mean? You're educated, clearly wealthy despite trying to hide it, and you understand business at a level that comes from experience, not books. She turned to face him. You haven't written a single word of this supposed book, so who are you running from? Khalil felt exposed, as if she could see through the careful identity he'd constructed. Part of him wanted to tell her everything. About the Al-Rashid Empire, the arranged marriage, the suffocating weight of expectations he'd carried his entire life. My family has expectations, he said finally. A path they've laid out for me since birth. Coming here was my way of finding space to breathe, to figure out what I want versus what they want. Elena studied him, her expression softening. And have you figured it out? I'm starting to, he admitted. Being here, working with real purpose, connecting with people who care about more than wealth and status, it's changing me. For better or worse, she asked, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Definitely better, though my father would disagree. They continued walking, shoulders occasionally brushing. Khalil felt a pull toward Elena that had nothing to do with their cooperative project and everything to do with the woman herself, her strength, her dedication to her community, her unflinching honesty. There's a festival this weekend, Elena said as they neared the village. The Feast of San Pedro, patron saint of fishermen. You should come. Will there be dancing? Khalil asked, surprised by his own boldness. Elena raised an eyebrow. Why? Are you any good? Terrible, but I'm willing to embarrass myself if the right partner asks. Their eyes met, and something shifted between them. The professional boundary they'd maintained began to blur. I guess you'll find out at the festival, Elena replied, a slight flush coloring her cheeks. The Feast of San Pedro transformed Costa Azul. Colorful banners stretched across streets. Food stalls filled the main square. Fishing boats decorated with flowers and ribbons paraded along the coast. Khalil joined Elena's family for the blessing of the fleet, standing beside her as a priest sprinkled holy water on the boats. Carmen insisted he join them for the feast afterward, treating him like family. As evening fell, music filled the square. Couples of all ages twirled and stepped to traditional folk songs. Khalil watched, entranced by the community's joyful celebration. You promised me embarrassment, Elena said, appearing at his side in a simple but beautiful blue dress, her hair loose around her shoulders. Khalil's heart skipped. I did, didn't I? He offered his hand with an exaggerated bow. Shall we? Their first dance was awkward, with Khalil stepping on Elena's toes twice, but by the third song they had found their rhythm. As the night progressed, they moved closer, her head eventually resting against his chest, his arms wrapped securely around her waist. Under the stars, with the village celebrating around them, Khalil felt a sense of belonging he'd never experienced in the marble halls of his family's palaces. When Elena looked up at him, her eyes reflecting the festival lights, he couldn't resist any longer. He lowered his head slowly, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. Their lips met in a kiss that started gentle but quickly deepened with months of building attraction. When they finally broke apart, both were breathless. Elena, Khalil began. Don't, she whispered, pressing her fingers to his lips. Don't analyze this. Not tonight. Tonight is for feeling, not thinking. They danced until the musicians packed away their instruments. They walked along the moonlit beach, stopping, occasionally to kiss under the stars. They talked about dreams and fears, childhoods and futures. Everything except the time bomb ticking in the background, Khalil's eventual return to his real life. As dawn broke, they sat on the rocks watching fishing boats head out for the morning catch. Elena's head rested on Khalil's shoulder, his arm around her waist. I've never felt this way before, he admitted quietly. Neither have I, Elena replied. It scares me. Why? Because you'll leave eventually, back to your real life, whatever that is. The truth of her words stung. Khalil had less than 3 weeks before his self-imposed deadline, before the wedding preparations would be in full swing, before his absence would transition from concerning to scandalous. What if I stayed? He asked, the question surprising even himself. Elena pulled back to look at him. Could you? Really? Before he could answer, shouts erupted from the harbor. They turned to see a crowd gathering near the market building. Elena was immediately on her feet, running toward the commotion with Khalil close behind. They arrived to find Ramon arguing heatedly with a well-dressed man, flanked by 2 security guards. "What's happening?" Elena demanded, pushing through the crowd. "Señorita Vargas," the man said smoothly. "Perfect timing. I was just informing these gentlemen that Mariscos International has purchased this market building. Effective immediately, all sales must go through our new management." The blood drained from Elena's face. "That's impossible. This building belongs to the municipality." "Not anymore." The man handed her a document. "Signed yesterday by Mayor Alvarez. I believe you'll find everything in order." Khalil read over Elena's shoulder, his business training allowing him to quickly identify the key points. It was indeed legal, a masterfully executed corporate takeover that effectively cut the heart out of their cooperative plans. As the implications sank in, Elena's expression hardened. "This isn't over," she told the corporate representative. "Not by a long shot." But as they walked away, Khalil could see the defeat in her shoulders, months of work undermined in a single stroke. The cooperative couldn't function without the market building as their central hub. "There has to be another way," he said, mind racing through alternatives. Elena stopped suddenly, turning to face him with fire in her eyes. "You asked what if..." "You stayed. I have a better question. What if you stopped hiding who you really are and used that to help us?" Khalil froze, Elena's words hanging in the air between them. "What do you mean?" "I'm not stupid, Khalil," Elena said, her voice low and intense. "The way you analyze business proposals, your understanding of corporate strategy, how you carry yourself. You're not just the son of some businessman. You're someone important, aren't you?" The moment he dreaded had arrived. Standing in the morning light, with the village awakening around them, Khalil made his decision. "Let's go somewhere private," he said. They walked silently to the cliff overlook near his cottage. When they reached the stone bench facing the sea, Khalil took a deep breath. "My full name is Khalil Farid al-Rashid," he began, watching Elena's expression carefully. "My family controls Al-Rashid Petroleum Enterprises. We're one of the largest energy conglomerates in the Middle East." Elena's eyes widened slightly, but she remained silent. 3 months ago, I was scheduled to meet my future wife, a marriage arranged to merge our company with another powerful family. Instead, I ran away. He gave a humorless laugh. "Childish, perhaps, but I needed space to think, to figure out if I could spend my life following a path chosen for me before I was born." "And Costa Azul was your hiding place," Elena said, her voice neutral. "At first, yes. Just somewhere anonymous to clear my head." Khalil reached for her hand, relieved when she didn't pull away. "But then I met you and everything changed. These past months, working with the fishermen, helping build the cooperative, being with you, it's the first time in my life I've felt truly alive." Elena withdrew her hand, standing to pace along the cliff edge. "So you've been lying this entire time?" "Not about the important things," Khalil insisted. "Not about how I feel about you, about the village, about what we're trying to accomplish. Were you ever going to tell me? Or was this just a charming vacation romance before returning to your real life?" The accusations stung, partly because Khalil wasn't sure of the answer himself. "I don't know," he admitted. "When I arrived, I had every intention of returning. Now, I'm not so certain." Elena turned to face him, arms crossed. "And what about your arranged marriage?" Khalil winced. "It's complicated. Breaking the engagement would have significant consequences, not just for me, but for hundreds of employees whose livelihoods depend on the merger." "So, there is a fiancé waiting for you?" "Yes." The simple admission hung between them like a physical barrier. Elena's expression hardened. "I need time to process this," she said finally. "And we still have a cooperative to save." "Elena..." "Not now, Khalil. Or should I call you Mr. Al-Rashid?" Without waiting for a response, she turned and walked rapidly down the path toward the village. Khalil remained on the bench watching her retreat. He had finally spoken his truth, but instead of feeling liberated, he felt more trapped than ever, caught between 2 worlds, neither of which he could fully inhabit without losing something precious. Back in his cottage, Khalil paced restlessly. After an hour of internal debate, he made a decision he'd been avoiding for weeks. He powered up the secure satellite phone he'd brought for emergencies. His father answered on the second ring. Khalil. The voice was controlled, revealing nothing. Father. I assume you've been tracking me. Of course. Though we've respected your request for space. A pause. Your deadline approaches. I know. Khalil took a deep breath. I need more time. Impossible. The Haddad family is growing impatient. The merger documents are prepared. Your absence has already sparked rumors. There are complications. His father's voice sharpened. What kind of complications? I've met someone. The silence that followed was deafening. When Farid spoke again, his tone was dangerously calm. You've jeopardized a multi-billion-dollar merger, the strategic future of our company and our family's honor. For a vacation romance. It's more than that, Khalil insisted. It always feels that way at first, his father replied dismissively. Who is she? Some European socialite? An American heiress? She's a fishmonger in a small Spanish village. Another long silence. You have 1 week, Farid said finally. 1 week to end this foolishness and return home. After that, I'll send Jabir to retrieve you. The mention of his father's head of security sent a chill through Khalil. That won't be necessary. 1 week, Khalil. The line went dead. Khalil spent the next day attempting to contact Elena, but she avoided him expertly. The village that had felt so welcoming now seemed filled with watchful eyes and whispered judgments. By evening, frustration drove him to El Faro. Carmen greeted him at the door, her expression uncharacteristically reserved. She's not here, she said before he could ask. Please, Carmen, I need to explain. The older woman studied him for a long moment. Come in. Help me prepare dinner. In the kitchen, Carmen handed him vegetables to chop. They worked in silence for several minutes. She told me who you are, Carmen said finally. I should have been honest from the beginning. Yes, you should have. Carmen wiped her hands on her apron. But I understand why you weren't. Sometimes we need to step outside our lives to see them clearly. I never meant to hurt her. Intentions matter. Less than actions, Khalil. She paused her cooking to face him. What are your intentions now? The question struck at the heart of his dilemma. I don't know, he admitted. My feelings for Elena are real, but my family, my responsibilities. The heart and mind rarely agree, Carmen said softly. Elena is at the old lighthouse. She goes there to think. The lighthouse stood on a rocky promontory at the far end of the bay. As Khalil approached, he could make out Elena's silhouette against the darkening sky. She heard his footsteps and turned. Your mother told you where to find me, she said, unsurprised. She thinks we should talk. And what do you think? Khalil moved to stand beside her, looking out at the horizon. I think I owe you the complete truth. Ask me anything. Elena was quiet for a moment. Tell me about her, your fiancée. Layla Haddad, daughter of Tariq Haddad, who controls the largest natural gas reserves in our region. We've met twice, both times with our families present. The engagement was arranged when we were both teenagers. Do you love her? I don't know her, Khalil said simply. The marriage is a business transaction, nothing more. And she's okay with that? She's as trapped as I am. In our world, marriage is often about alliance, not affection. Elena shook her head. That sounds incredibly lonely. It can be, Khalil admitted. Until Costa Azul, I never questioned it. It was simply how things were done. And now? Now. I understand what I'd be giving up. He turned to face her fully. Elena, what I feel for you— Don't, she interrupted. Don't make promises you can't keep. I'm not. I'm trying to be honest about how complicated this is. Elena's laugh was bitter. Complicated? You're engaged to another woman. You're the heir to a massive fortune. You've been living a double life. Complicated seems inadequate. Fair point. Khalil ran a hand through his hair. My father called me yesterday. I have 1 week to return home. Elena's expression didn't change, but he saw her shoulders tense. And will you? I don't know, he answered honestly. But before I decide anything, we need to deal with Morisco's International. I won't leave with the cooperative in jeopardy. How? They've outsmarted us at every turn. Not anymore. Determination filled Khalil's voice. Now they're dealing with an al-Rashid. And while I may have issues with my family legacy, I did learn a few things about corporate warfare. For the first time since his revelation, Elena smiled slightly. I'm listening. The next morning, Khalil placed another call on his satellite, phone this time to his cousin Zafar, who managed the family's European investments. Cousin, we thought you'd fallen off the face of the earth, Zafar greeted him. Not quite. I need a favor, Zafar, and absolute discretion. Intriguing. Continue. I need everything you can find on Morisco's International, corporate structure, financials, major shareholders, debt load, everything. Zafar's voice turned serious. This sounds like business, Khalil. Your father was explicit that no family resources were to be used during your sabbatical. This isn't family business, it's personal, and I'll owe you one. A pause. Give me 24 hours. True to his word, Zafar delivered a comprehensive file the next day. Khalil and Elena spent hours poring over the information in his cottage, identifying weaknesses in Morisco's International's position. They're over-leveraged, Khalil explained, pointing to financial statements. They've expanded too quickly, taking on significant debt to acquire processing facilities all along the coast. How does that help us? Elena asked. They're vulnerable to cash flow disruptions. If the independent fishing fleet, representing 60% of the local catch, refused to sell to them for even 2 weeks, Elena caught on quickly. They'd miss debt payments. Exactly. And their largest creditor is... Khalil pointed to a name on the document. Banco Mediterraneo. Elena read, My Uncle Diego works there. We need to coordinate the fleet, secure temporary alternative buyers, and approach the bank about potential refinancing options that would include protections for independent fishermen. For the next 5 days, they worked furiously, meeting with fishermen, contacting restaurant associations in nearby tourist destinations, and building a coalition strong enough to pressure Morisco's International. Elena's local connections combined with Khalil's business acumen created a formidable team. On the 6th day, they presented their plan to the community. The fishermen, initially skeptical, gradually warmed to the strategy, as Khalil explained, how leveraging their collective power could force Morisco's to negotiate fair terms. This won't be easy, he cautioned. There will be short-term hardships, but together you're stronger than any corporation. Ramon stood, his weathered face solemn. My father fought corporate trawlers with nothing but his small boat and determination. If he could stand against giants, so can we. One by one, the fishermen pledged their support. By the meeting's end, the entire fleet had committed to the plan. As the crowd dispersed, Elena pulled Khalil aside. Tomorrow is your deadline. I know. Have you decided? Before he could answer, his phone rang, his father's ringtone. I need to take this, he said apologetically. Khalil walked to a quiet corner. Father. Your week is up, Khalil. Jabir. Leaves tomorrow morning. That won't be necessary. I've booked a flight. I'll be home in 3 days. A pause. Good. The Haddads will be relieved. I didn't say I was going through with the wedding. His father's voice hardened. This is not a negotiation, Khalil. No, it's a conversation between equals. I'm coming. Home to discuss options, not to blindly follow your plan. Your inheritance will mean nothing if I'm miserable for the rest of my life, Khalil interrupted. 3 days, father. He ended the call and turned to find Elena standing behind him, her expression unreadable. You're leaving, she said. It wasn't a question. I have to face this directly. Running away solved nothing. And us? Was this just an interlude before returning to real life? Khalil moved closer, taking her hands in his. You are my real life, Elena. The most real thing I've ever known. He swallowed hard. Come with me. Elena's eyes widened. To Saudi Arabia? To meet your family? Do you have any idea how insane that sounds? Completely insane, he agreed. But I want them to know the woman who changed everything for me. Khalil, I can't just abandon the cooperative at this critical moment. And what would your family think of me? A Spanish fishmonger with no connections, no fortune. They'll think I've lost my mind. And maybe I have. He cupped her face gently. But I've never been more certain of anything in my life. I love you, Elena Vargas. Tears filled her eyes. I love you too. But love isn't always enough. It's a start, Khalil insisted. I'm not asking for forever right now. Just come with me, meet my family, help me figure out what's possible. Before Elena could respond, her phone rang. She looked at the screen and frowned. It's Miguel. She answered quickly, her expression shifting from confusion to shock. We'll be right there. What's wrong? Khalil asked as she ended the call. Someone broke into the community center. All our cooperative documents, contracts, everything. Destroyed. They arrived at the center to find a crowd gathered outside. Inside, papers were scattered everywhere, computers smashed, filing cabinets overturned. This was professionally done, Khalil muttered, examining the damage. Ramon approached, his face grim. Marisco's International, they must have learned about our plan. Elena knelt among the scattered papers, her hands trembling slightly. Years of work, all our evidence of unfair practices, all our member agreements. Khalil placed a hand on her shoulder. This changes nothing. We still have our strategy. This just proves they're scared. Scared enough to fight dirty, Elena replied bitterly. As they worked to salvage what they could, Carmen arrived with food for the volunteers. She pulled Khalil aside while Elena was directing the cleanup. There's a man asking for you at the restaurant, she said quietly. Very expensive suit. Says his name is Jabir. Khalil's blood ran cold. My father's security chief. He wasn't supposed to come until tomorrow. He doesn't look like someone who follows other people's schedules. Keep him there. I need 10 minutes. Khalil found Elena organizing salvage documents. We need to talk now. In the privacy of the center's back office, he explained the situation. My father sent someone for me, earlier than promised. Elena's face paled. So this is it? Not yet. Khalil took her hands. I need you to trust me. Can you do that? After a moment's hesitation, she nodded. Good. I need another day to set things in motion for the cooperative. Stay here, keep working. I'll handle Jabir. Elena squeezed his hands. Just promise me one thing. Whatever you decide, come say goodbye before you leave, even if it's the middle of the night. I promise. Khalil found Jabir sitting at a corner table in El Faro, his tailored suit incongruous, among the casual diners. The security chief's expression remained impassive as Khalil approached. Young master, Jabir greeted him, rising slightly. Your father sends his regards. I'm sure he does, Khalil replied dryly, taking the seat opposite. I told him I'd return in 3 days. Why are you here early? Circumstances have changed. Jabir slid a tablet across the table. Your presence is required immediately. Khalil scrolled through the news articles displayed on the screen. The business press was speculating wildly about his absence, with rumors ranging from health issues to family disputes affecting the merger. The Al-Rashid stock had dropped nearly 8%. The Haddad family is threatening to withdraw, Jabir continued. Your father has authorized me to use whatever means necessary to ensure your prompt return. The implicit threat hung in the air. Khalil knew Jabir was capable of forcibly removing him if necessary. I need 24 hours, Khalil said, keeping his voice steady. There are matters I must conclude here. 12 hours, Jabir countered. The jet is fueled and waiting at Barcelona International. We depart at dawn. Khalil nodded, knowing further negotiation was pointless. I'll be ready. As Jabir left, Carmen approached, concern evident in her eyes. Is everything all right? No, Khalil admitted, but it will be. I need to make some calls. For the next, 6 hours, Khalil worked feverishly. First, he contacted Zafar again, this time with specific instructions regarding Marisco's International. Next, he called several banking connections, calling in favors and making arrangements. Finally, he made the most difficult call, to his mother. "Khalil," Samira al-Rashid's voice was warm with relief. "Are you well?" "I'm fine, mother, but I need your help." He explained the situation as succinctly as possible. The village, the cooperative, and Elena. "You love this woman," his mother said. "It wasn't a question." "Yes." A long pause followed. "Your father will not accept this easily." "I know. That's why I need your influence. There's something else you should know about." Elena. Night had fallen by the time Khalil returned to the community center. Most volunteers had gone home, but Elena remained, sorting through salvaged documents by lamplight. "You look exhausted," he said softly. She looked up, smiling despite her fatigue. "Says the man who hasn't slept in 2 days." Khalil sat beside her, taking her hands in his. "I have to leave in the morning." Elena's smile faded, but she nodded. "I know." "I've made arrangements," he continued. "Zafar, my cousin, will be contacting you tomorrow. The Al-Rashid Family Trust is establishing a fund for sustainable fishing communities along the Mediterranean coast. Costa Azul will be the pilot program." Elena's eyes widened. "What?" €5 million to start, enough to purchase the market building outright and establish processing facilities owned by the cooperative. Khalil squeezed her hands. "Morisco's International will find their credit lines suddenly restricted. They'll be looking to divest assets quickly, including a certain recently acquired market building." "Khalil, we can't accept this. It's not charity, it's investment in sustainable practices. The trust will hold a minority stake, but operational control remains with the cooperative." He smiled slightly. "I may have also mentioned to certain business publications that Al-Rashid Petroleum is exploring green initiatives. Our stock is already recovering." "You've thought of everything," Elena said, her voice tinged with sadness. "Except us." Khalil took a deep breath. "Come with me." Khalil. "Not permanently, just for a week. Meet my family. Let me show you my world, as you've shown me yours." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small envelope. "Your passport." "And a ticket. The choice is yours." Elena stared at the envelope. "I have responsibilities here. The arrangements will proceed whether you come or not. The cooperative is secure." Khalil cupped her face gently. "This isn't about responsibility. Elena, this is about us. What am I supposed to do in Saudi Arabia? Meet your fiancé?" "Former fiancé, if all goes according to plan." He hesitated. "There's something else you should know, something I discovered while researching your family." Elena frowned. "My family? Why would you—" "Your grandfather's name was Malik Vargas, wasn't it? Before that it was Malik ibn Hassan al-Qahtani." Elena's expression froze. "How did you know that? My grandfather never spoke of his past." "Because the al-Qahtani family was one of the most prominent in Saudi Arabia, until a political coup forced your grandfather into exile. He wasn't just any Saudi. He was royalty, Elena. Your blood is as noble as mine." The revelation hung between them. Elena shook her head slowly. "That doesn't change anything. I'm still just a fishmonger from a small Spanish village." "No," Khalil said firmly. "You're a woman who rebuilt a community, who fought for justice, who taught a spoiled heir what truly matters in life. And if you come with me, you can show my family what you've shown me, that there's more to life than power and wealth." Dawn found them at the airport, standing before the private jet emblazoned with the Al-Rashid logo. Jabir waited at the bottom of the stairs, his expression carefully neutral as Elena approached with Khalil. "We have a guest," Khalil informed him. "Make the necessary arrangements." To his credit, Jabir merely nodded. "Of course, young master. We've been instructed to divert to Cairo first. Your mother will meet you there." Elena squeezed Khalil's hand nervously. "Are you sure about this?" "No," he admitted, "but I'm sure about you." As the jet climbed above the clouds, Elena gazed out the window at the receding coastline. "I've never left Spain before." "I promise to bring you back," Khalil said, "whatever happens." Cairo was a whirlwind of luxury that left Elena wide-eyed. They were escorted to a private suite at the Four Seasons, where Samira al-Rashid waited. Khalil's mother was a striking woman in her early 60s, dressed in elegant Western attire. She embraced her son warmly before turning her attention to Elena. "So you are the woman who captured my son's heart," she said, studying Elena with keen eyes. "Mother, this is Elena Vargas," Khalil introduced them. "Elena, my mother, Samira al-Rashid." To Elena's surprise, Samira took her hands gently. "I knew your grandfather," she said softly. "Malik was a good man. His exile was a great injustice." Elena blinked back sudden tears. "He never spoke of home." "Some wounds are too painful to reopen." Samira gestured for them to sit. "We have much to discuss before meeting Farid." For the next 2 hours, Samira outlined the complexities of the situation. The Haddad family was furious, but primarily concerned with maintaining their business interests. Alternative arrangements could potentially be made, a partnership rather than a merger, secured by different means than marriage. "Your father remains adamant," Samira told Khalil, "but he is not unreasonable. Show him that you've thought this through, that you're not simply rebelling." "And what about Elena?" Khalil asked. "He'll see her as an obstacle." Samira smiled slightly. "Leave that to me." The Al-Qahtani name still carries weight, even in exile. The flight to Riyadh the next morning was tense. Elena wore a conservative but stylish outfit Samira had provided, while Khalil prepared mentally for the confrontation ahead. "Whatever happens," he told Elena as they began their descent, "remember that I love you." Farid al-Rashid waited in his private office, a vast space overlooking the city skyline. His expression remained impassive as Khalil entered with Elena. "So this is why you abandoned your responsibilities," he said, his gaze sweeping over Elena dismissively. "Father, allow me to introduce Elena Vargas al-Qahtani," Khalil said formally. A flicker of surprise crossed Farid's face. "Al-Qahtani, Malik's granddaughter." "Yes," Elena answered, her voice steady despite her nerves. "Though I learned of my heritage only recently." Farid studied her more carefully. "Interesting. Still, this changes nothing. The merger can proceed through alternative means," Khalil interrupted. "I've drafted a proposal. Joint ventures in renewable energy, shared distribution networks, minority cross-ownership. The same benefits without forcing a marriage neither party desires." "You presume to lecture me on business?" Farid's voice hardened. "No. I presume to show you that I've learned what you taught me. Strategic thinking, creative solutions, putting the company's interests first." Khalil placed a folder on the desk. "The numbers speak for themselves." For nearly an hour, father and son debated the proposal's merits. Elena watched in growing admiration as Khalil held his ground, demonstrating a business acumen she'd only glimpsed in Costa Azul. Finally, Farid leaned back. "You've clearly put thought into this, but the Haddads expect a wedding." "The Haddads expect security for their investment," Khalil countered. "This provides it without sacrificing anyone's happiness." "And what of your responsibilities to this family, to our legacy?" "I'm not abandoning them. I'm expanding our vision." Khalil gestured to Elena. "In Costa Azul, I established a sustainable fishing cooperative that's already garnering international attention. Green investment, community development, these are the future, father. Not just oil." A long silence followed. Finally, Farid turned to Elena. "And you, granddaughter of Malik, what do you seek here?" Elena met his gaze directly. "I seek nothing for myself, Mr. Al-Rashid. I came because I love your son, because he showed me that wealth and power can be forces for good when wielded with compassion." "Pretty words," Farid remarked. "But you must understand, my son stands to inherit billions. Many women would claim love in such circumstances." "With all due respect," Elena replied evenly, "where I come from, a person's worth isn't measured by their bank account. Khalil earned my respect through his actions, not his name." Something shifted in Farid's expression. Perhaps respect, perhaps simply reassessment. "I'll consider your proposal," he said finally. "The Haddads arrive tomorrow. We'll discuss alternatives then." He fixed Khalil with a stern look. "But Understand this. While I may bend on the method, I will not compromise on the outcome. The alliance must be secured. As they left the office, Khalil exhaled shakily. That went better than expected. He's formidable, Elena observed. You held your own admirably, Khalil smiled. I think you impressed him. I wasn't trying to impress him, I was defending us. The next 24 hours passed in a blur of meetings, formal dinners, and negotiations. Elena met Layla Haddad, finding her to be intelligent and surprisingly supportive once she understood the situation. I never wanted this marriage either, Layla confided during a rare private moment. I have someone too, a professor I met at Oxford. When the final agreement was struck, it satisfied all parties. The business alliance would proceed through joint ventures and strategic partnerships. The Al-Rashid and Haddad families would be connected, not through marriage, but through shared interests and mutual benefit. 1 month later, Khalil and Elena stood on the cliffs of Costa Azul, watching fishing boats return with the day's catch. Below them, construction crews worked to renovate the market building, now owned by the cooperative. Your father is arriving tomorrow, Elena reminded him, leaning into his embrace. Along with half the board of directors, Khalil added. They're calling it a fact-finding mission on sustainable fishing practices, but really, they want to see what captured the heart of the prodigal son. Are you nervous? About them? No. Khalil turned to face her fully. But I am nervous about something else. Elena raised an eyebrow. What? Khalil withdrew a small box from his pocket and dropped to one knee. Helena Vargas Al-Qahtani, you showed me what real life could be. You taught me that legacy isn't just what we inherit, but what we build. He opened the box, revealing a ring with a simple but exquisite diamond. Will you marry me? Not for alliance or advantage, but for love. Tears filled Elena's eyes as she nodded. Yes, 1,000 times yes. As they sealed their promise with a kiss, the setting sun bathed Costa Azul in golden light. Below them, fishermen called to each other, children played along the shore, and life continued its eternal rhythm. They had challenged tradition, confronted power, and risked everything for love. Now standing together on the cliffs where their journey began, they faced not just their own future, but the future of 2 worlds they had managed to bridge. What happens now? Elena asked softly. Khalil smiled, taking her hand. Now we write our own story. And as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, they walked together toward the village, not as an heir and a fishmonger, but as 2 people who had defied destiny to forge their own path. The end for Dear listeners, we hope Khalil and Elena's journey from different worlds to true love has touched your heart. Their story reminds us that sometimes we must challenge our predetermined paths to find genuine happiness. If you enjoyed this tale of love conquering social boundaries, we've prepared a special playlist with equally captivating stories. Find it by clicking to your left. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and leave a like on this video to support more original content. We bring unique stories exploring life's complexities every day. What was your favorite moment from Khalil and Elena's journey? The festival dance, their first kiss, or perhaps when Elena discovered her royal heritage? Share your thoughts in the comments section below. Until our next adventure together. End of story.